You said yes again, to the extra shift even though you didn't want to. Most people assume it's a confidence issue, or shyness, or just being a good person. But what if I told you that your inability to say no has nothing to do with your personality? What if it's actually your brain running a survival program? One that was installed in you years ago, possibly before you even knew what a boundary was. Today, we're going to look at the real psychology behind people-pleasing. Not the self-help version, the neuroscience version. And by the end, you might see yourself and the people around you very differently. People-pleasing sounds harmless. It even sounds kind. But psychologists define it very specifically. It's a pattern of consistently prioritizing other people's needs, emotions, and approval at the direct expense of your own. And here's what separates genuine kindness from people-pleasing. Choice. A generous person helps because they want to. A people-pleaser helps because they're afraid of what happens if they don't. That fear might be subtle. It might just feel like mild discomfort when you imagine saying no, but it's there. In 2025, researchers published a study in the journal Psych Journal, validating a questionnaire to measure people-pleasing across 3 dimensions: your thoughts, your behaviors, and your feelings. What they found was that people-pleasers scored significantly higher on neuroticism, loneliness, and, crucially, lower on overall mental well-being. In other words, people-pleasing doesn't just feel tiring, it's quietly making you less mentally healthy. And the reason goes deep into your brain. Here's what's happening inside your brain when someone asks you for something you don't want to do. Your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, fires. It reads the social situation and asks a very primal question. Is saying no dangerous? If your history taught you that conflict leads to punishment, withdrawal of love, or instability, your brain learned the answer is yes. And so it reaches for the fastest stress relief available: agreement. The moment you say yes, your stress chemistry drops. Your heart rate slows. The cortisol spike eases. You feel temporary relief. And your brain records that lesson. Saying yes kept you safe. Neuroscience researchers have confirmed that chronic people-pleasing is driven by elevated cortisol and what's called the dorsal vagal pathway, a part of your nervous system that activates appeasement as a survival strategy when direct confrontation feels too risky. Here's the cruel twist. Every time you say yes to avoid that spike, the neural circuits for assertiveness and boundary setting get weaker from disuse. While the circuits for people-pleasing get stronger, you're not just choosing to agree. Over time, you've literally rewired your brain to default to yes. You've probably heard of fight or flight, maybe even freeze. But there's a 4th trauma response that almost nobody talks about, and it's the one that looks the most normal from the outside. It's called the fawn response. Coined by therapist Pete Walker, the fawn response is what happens when your nervous system learns that the safest way to handle a threat is to appease it, to become useful, to become easy, to make the other person feel good so they don't become a problem. Fawning looks like volunteering before anyone asks. It looks like apologizing when you've done nothing wrong. It looks like reading a room so carefully that you've shaped your entire personality around what other people seem to want. And here's why it's so hard to catch. Unlike fight or flight, fawning gets socially rewarded. People tell you you're so easy to work with, so generous, so kind, so you keep doing it. And the cost stays invisible until it shows up as exhaustion, resentment, or a creeping sense that you don't actually know who you are when no one needs anything from you. People-pleasing almost never starts in adulthood. Researchers have linked it to what are called early maladaptive schemas, deeply held beliefs about yourself and the world that form in childhood when emotional needs go unmet. The 3 schemas most linked to people-pleasing are an enmeshed sense of self, where your identity is fused with others' needs, subjugation, where you believe your own feelings must be suppressed, and self-sacrifice, where your worth feels conditional on what you provide. These don't come from nowhere. They come from environments where love felt inconsistent, where keeping the peace was necessary, where having needs led to consequences. It's also worth noting that gender plays a role. Research consistently shows that women are socialized more heavily toward harmony and selflessness, which means the external pressure to please is often layered on top of whatever internal wiring is already there. The real price of chronic people-pleasing isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's the resentment that builds toward people you genuinely care about, because you gave them what they asked for, not what you actually had to give. It's the anxiety that arrives, not when things go wrong, but when things go right, because now you have to maintain this version of yourself. It's the identity confusion that comes from having spent so long mirroring what others need that you've lost the habit of checking what you need. Psychologists note that people pleasers often experience what's called the vicious cycle. You seek approval to feel better about yourself, but the act of prioritizing everyone else erodes your self-esteem further, which makes you need more approval, which makes you people please more. And the longer the cycle runs, the more difficult it becomes to interrupt, not because of willpower, but because of neurology. So where does this leave you? If any of this felt uncomfortably familiar, that recognition is itself important. You can't change a pattern you haven't named. The shift away from people-pleasing isn't about becoming cold or selfish. It's about learning to tell the difference between generosity that comes from choice and compliance that comes from fear. That's a nervous system conversation. It takes time, but it starts with one small moment of noticing the difference between what you want to say and what you're about to say instead. If you found this video useful, consider sharing it with someone you know who might be running this pattern without realizing it. It's the kind of thing that tends to click for people right when they need it most. And if you want to go deeper into the psychology of how your mind shapes your behavior, subscribe. And thanks for watching.